science that Dr. Lowe is doing and that some other scientists have done is Sport Fishing Association of California, SAC. They got all the sport fishing boats in California. They've spent thousands of dollars supplying the boats with a decompression device. So these boats are supposed to have some sort of decompression device. I believe the one that they bought was the sequelizer that they provided them with. I've been on a few of the boats up out of Oxnard, and they do have a rod set aside with a decompression device. As Dr. Lowe mentioned in the video, there's all sorts of devices. You can have a milk crate, but they're kind of bulky. A lot of people don't want those on their boat. The sequelizer is awesome. The Shelton release device is good. There's homemade ones. And basically what it is, you just make it like, it's like an inverted hook. You put the fish down to the right depth, and then you just give it a good jerk, and it pops out of the fish's lip, and the fish can swim away. So it's a great option for us as anglers if you catch a fish that shows signs of barotrauma. And as he said, they've really only studied rockfish, so we don't know if this would work for sand bass, black sea bass. You would assume a big fish like that, but those black sea bass those are getting more and more plentiful along the coast and at the islands. So it's a good. They're a little bit more difficult because once they get above that 20 and 30 pound weight, you need a lot more weight to get them down. We've used anchors on our boat. We've caught a 200 pound black sea bass and had to use a big cruise anchor to get it back down. But again, having the knowledge that this does work as anglers, responsible anglers, if you see a descending device, or if you want to get online and buy one just to have in your tackle box, it's not necessary. Don't make it have it be the boat's responsibility, but it's your individual responsibility as a responsible angler. If you catch a fish you're not going to keep that has barotrauma, then you can take that on yourself to release it. Anyone have any questions?
Question one, the last thing he said was we need to take it down. It didn't really say how far down.
Right.
And then the other thing, just a comment, since I have the floor, I was just out on a boat, and I never saw any one of these devices, and we had a stream of little fish, as far as you can see, and it's sitting right next to the captain, and he nothing being hidden.
Right.
And the comment is, well, the sequel's got to eat too.
Yeah, I know.
But it just happens.
And yeah.
And how much does one of these cost?
They're all like the little Shelton one, which is like the metal, that one little tiny metal one. I think you can get those for like $5 or $10. I know the sequelizer is more like $30 or $40. And again, with SAC, I don't know, and maybe somebody in here would know if that's if the boats choose to be a member of SAC, the sport fishing boats. Maybe you guys, I don't know that, but I know there's a large percentage of the boats that are represented by SAC. So those boats are supposed, they're recommending that they put sequelizers on those boats. Again, as the captains and the deckhands, it ultimately is their responsibility. If they don't want to take the time to do it, they're not legally bound to do it. It's just something that's recommended by the governing umbrella.
That's the issue. Things like nets, rubberized nets instead of nylon nets with knots.
Right.
Fishing game, if you look at the code, they tell you you've got to have a net on board with a 22-inch diameter. They recommend a gap or some type of device like that. If they changed the law and said you needed a rubberized net, the size could be the same, and you were required to have one of these devices. There was a fellow in San Diego, he's also at the show, he's got a spring-loaded stainless steel clip that grabs the jaw. We put a torpedo sinker, big, very simple. Required by law to have it on board. Most people are not going to just do this because they're good folks and they'd like to do that. Most of them aren't. And the only way to change that is to legislate it and change it. Another thing about the black sea bass. I was on a trip not a couple of years ago where every black sea, there were quite a few caught, the Cortez Bank. The crew would go and gap it under the chin, in the jaw, put a big tear in the tissue, and lift it up a couple feet so a picture could be taken. I mean, that's the kind of thing that ought to be, if you're not allowed to take them, they certainly shouldn't harm them like that.
Right.
But there's like there's no rules. I mean, what are you gonna do if you're on a boat and you see the captain of the crew doing that? You're gonna walk up there and tell him, you can't do that?
Only if you want to walk along.
How do you fix it? Well, the bigger picture, folks said just a net is a net.
And, you know, and again, that comes back to individually or as a club, if you guys have a charter, you know, and you go out on a boat, you can say, these are our ethics, our morals. If we, you know, what we're recommending, and I wish that we had the money to provide one to every club, the sequelizers, is to, as a club, buy a sequelizer, have a rod set aside with it rigged up, so that if she catches a rockfish, she can release it herself. If he catches a rockfish 10 minutes later, he can release it himself. Because sometimes the crew simply does not want to take the time to do it, which is unfortunate. But I know, and again, it comes back, Pacific Dawn, the Mirage, and this is only, I can only speak from the boats that I've been on up north. They have them. Again, they're not wanting to release a lot of fish. You know, that's their nature. They want the fish count, they want the fish cleaning. But as an angler, that's your individual choice if I'm going to keep this fish or not. And just to answer your question, about a third of the depth that you catch the fish at. So if you catch it at 100 foot and it has barotrauma, you need to get it down to about 30 foot. If you catch it at 200 foot, you need to get it down to about 70 foot. That's kind of the general rule.
What depth is barotrauma occur? I mean, how deep you catch within 30 feet, do you have to worry about it?
No, it's usually over about 80 to 100 foot is when you're going to start to see signs of barotrauma. Yeah, usually in that 30 to 40, even under 50 foot, you're not really going to see. Again, it depends a lot on the fish too. We've caught black sea bass in 50 foot of water, and you fight them for an hour and a half because it's a huge fish, and you're, trying to catch bass on 20-pound fish. That fish, even though it's not, it just gets tired, and some of that gas will still expand.
It's unfortunate because in our tournament series, sometimes these guys fish deep in sand bass.
Right.
At 100 or something.
Yeah.
They can.
I imagine sand bass might be next to be studied.
But the problem is that we have to bring them in and weigh them in.
Right.
So by the time, there's a fish loss, unless they do either, there's the swim bladder or whatever to get that gas out.
Right.
And they probably do that right away so that the fish stays alive.
Right.
So that they can weigh them in on them.
Right, so that they're still
But
technically alive.
you're doing damage already there, so.
And they found too, I wish, Dr. Lowe spoke for 45 minutes to an hour. He had lots of information. But one of the things that he talked about is you catch a fish, a lot of, the longer it's out of the water, in the bait tank. Some guys must throw it in the bait tank and every half hour we'll let them go. Well, the longer that fish is at that surface temperature, the more that gas is expanding. So their best chance of survival is to be released within under 5 minutes of catching them.
What's the legal depth that we can fish?
You can't fish anything over 300, I believe. I think that's the new,
I was just on, it was 300,
yeah.
but it varies as you go further north.
Yeah, San Diego
I
Island,
fished
it's 120 feet.
up in Northern California.
Yeah, you get the California conservation areas, used to be 360, they changed it to 300. Yeah, San Nicolas Island, in that area.
I go to Mendocino, and there's 120 feet. So
Okay. Yeah, north of Point Conception, it's a whole new set of rules and seasons and everything.
Yeah, I'm commercial fish, like 7 rock time.
Okay.
But when we fish like 2,000 feet, but the colder water than that, does that affect the lifespan of being in the journey? Because obviously it's a lot colder down lower.
Yeah, well, and that's why, so if you catch a rockfish, say you're fishing locally, out on the islands, and you're fishing 100 feet at, maybe it's 65 up on the surface. It's probably 55 or lower, 100 foot down. So the longer that fish is in what that warmer water does, it makes that gas expand quicker. So that goes back to the longer they're at a warmer temperature of water.
So obviously the faster turnaround now.
Right, when it gets back down to depth and back down to that cooler water.
So Jennifer, where do you buy, I might have missed it, where do you buy these devices? If I wanted to get just the inverted hook or something?
The sequelizer, it's C is in ocean, SEA, and then just like as if you were spelling out equalizer. Those are only on their website, last I checked. They have a
What
specific.
website is that?
Sequelizer.com.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think you can get those on Amazon or anything like that. A lot of the tackle shops sell, I know West Marine even sells descending devices similar to the one Tom was talking about. But they're a little bit, they're big, they're kind of, 18 inches maybe. You clip the metal hook. Some of those you can actually select the depth. And I know with the Sequelizer, it gives you, I think, a 50-foot and a 100-foot. But some of the more advanced ones, you can select a specific depth that you want it to release at. West Marine does sell some of those, I know for a fact that they do. So you can go on West Marine, just look at your local tackle stores.
Are there some fish that are tagged that the Conservancy would like? I mean, you say, you tag thousands of fish. Is there a possibility that we can catch a fish and see a tag in it, or?
Yeah, and we don't have any involvement with that. That's Dr. Lowe's science. I think most, if you catch a fish, I don't think they do a whole lot of tagging anymore, but I'm sure there's fish out there that have been tagged, several years ago. I think the information's on there. At the very least, you send it to Fish and Wildlife. And they'll be able to get it right.
So this is all new that's come about?
Well, their science is within the last few years.
See, we were always taught, catch black sea bass, deep, get a meal, bucket.
Yeah.
Gives oxygen, he swims from it.
Yeah, and maybe with a hardier fish like that, I don't know what kind of numbers they have on fish mortality, fish that were punctured with whether it was the stomach or, maybe the swim bladder behind the fin. Maybe honestly, I don't know. But it's pretty common. I mean, if you think about it, you're putting a hole.
Yeah.
You're throwing it, especially if it's in the stomach. I've done it, and that's what we were told to do.
Yeah, that's where I was taught.
Yeah.
You didn't, you couldn't keep the fish.
Right.
And we done it over at Kathleen, and that's one about 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Just poking,
They're
bring
hard.
that, take a picture.
Yeah, because they fight for so long, they get so tired. And a lot of times, all you have to do is drag it back and forth along the side of the boat.
Yeah, that's what we do.
And it just takes a while for them to get their energy back.
When you're talking about a lot of the fish that are being thrown to the side, what's the common makeup of those fish? Is it calcon? Are they species that aren't allowed to be kept, or are they too small?
They're probably too small. As a boat, they'll fill their limit on a species before they throw anything back. So when you're it might be a small rockfish that you just don't want to keep. If it's a cowpod or something like that, you legally, that's really the only one that you legally can't keep.
So it's not a string of calcon every time?
No, you're not seeing any
Majority
of
is
those.
small.
But it's probably just smaller fish. Some people don't like salmon grouper. So maybe they catch a salmon grouper and they're like, I just want reds. I'm not keeping that. And they throw a salmon grouper
And
back.
that's up to the angler to decide?
It is, ultimately, if you're gonna do that, the best thing to do is say, would anybody else like it? I'll throw it in someone else's sack. Thank you, yeah. I try not to look at the meat when I fillet it. Just cook it really well.
We're talking about the eyes and pressure thing, but, you catch a lot of fish. There's other ways of harming the fish too. They're hooked deeply, there's,
Right.
big thing about turtle hooks and tails.
Right.
There's been studies of,
Well, that was within this best practices workshop. Another part of that was, so what's the tackle that we can use? The knotless net. If you use a knotted net, say you're catching a halibut, and you go to net a 23-inch halibut, or maybe it's 21 inches, but you have to measure it, right? So you net that halibut, and it splays the tail, splits the tail because of the knots and the nylon knots in there. They will most likely die from infection in their tail. So if you use a knotless net, that does not happen. Circle hooks, again, that was another one of the things that we talked about is if you can, fish with circle hooks. Because the majority of the time, that fish will be hooked in the corner of the mouth. If you decide to release it, there's no damage done to the internal organs.
Along that line, I have a hard time with the fact they say, well, a hook's going to dissolve in a short period of time. I have a hard time believing an iron hook is going to dissolve in less than a couple of years.
Yeah, it's probably not going to.
Yeah.
So, again, another argument for circle hooks.
Some of the fish like that.
Get the hook out, and if it does damage, then you plan on keeping the fish.
These workshops seem really well, it was a great presentation. From your experience, do you see, with all the effort that was put into the conservation, the regulations, and the depths of fishing, it was a very active movement, do you see that some of these release devices, is there a push towards them being mandatory in the future? Have you seen any activity towards that?
You know, I would like them to be, because if it means that if they say, I absolutely have to have a release device and a knotless net on my boat, okay, fine, I can do that, I
I'm
already do.
just kind of on the sport.
But, well, yeah, and they, again, I have to go, that would have to be legally mandated, that they have to do
Do you
that.
see any movement into that direction?
Not yet, because this is so new
Oh, okay.
to everybody. Some people don't know that you can do this. But what we're hoping, and I can't make any promises, but, and this is probably still 5 or 10 years away, but if by doing this responsible angling, this might kind of loosen up on some of the regulations that we have. Maybe we can fish a little bit deeper. Maybe that 120-foot depth is increased.
It seems like once a law gets passed, though, it never goes back. I mean, one of these MLPA's things are never going to be open again, because in our lifetimes. And so therefore, we
But
always.
it's been a long time since we've had really good science that shows that it works.
Yeah, you kind of feel like they just rather shut everything down rather than do
Well, again, back to what Dr. Lowe said in the beginning, you know, we've always assumed that that's fish we get. So, okay, well, then we gotta create limits and seasons and you know, closure areas. Now that we know that that fish is not necessarily dead, we might have some options. But again, yeah, it's nothing that's gonna happen in a year, it's several years, if it's gonna happen.
I really think the fishermen have to push this.
Absolutely.
Because Sacramento is going to close the fishing, is, I think what their thing is. And if we have to be proactive and get these, just like back slot limits. If fishermen push for it and then do it, they can't whine as much. They will whine though.
That's why SAC is really pushing these boats to have a release device, because it's us taking the first step towards, you know, conservation. And again, you can't force that boat to do it, but you can say, I caught this fish, I'm going to release it, I don't want to keep
I
it.
think it has to be a personal thing.
Absolutely.
Because I've been on boats, there's 30 people fishing, especially rockfish, there's fish being caught, you know, a dozen every minute practically. And there's a couple of deckhands, they just don't want to, unless you do it yourself. They want to.
But maybe you do it, and the guy
Right.
next to you says, what is that?
Yeah,
What are you doing? So it's a little bit of a, you know, grassroots movement from us as anglers, and as a club. If you guys go out and that's more fish that Kathy knows, okay, this is what they want, we're gonna, you know, help them out.
From the studies, what percentage of the fish will benefit from this? I have no feel for the percentage of the fish that could be released.
You mean within a particular species, or?
Or whatever, I mean,
So
take a
it's,
species, I mean,
So they
we're talking about people on a boat, they bring up a fish that they don't want for whatever reason, and that there's some ways that can be reintroduced into the water. I don't have a feel for if that's 1% of the fish that are caught or 70% of it. And it seems like that would have been something that would have been picked up in a study.
well, on their, they only studied 17 species of rockfish.
Okay.
So they didn't get into the bass, they didn't get into halibut or lingcod or anything like that. So of those 17 species, 70% survived.
Right, I understand that, but what is the percentage that could be reintroduced? I'm trying to determine the benefit of this. I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, and if it's 1% of the fish could be reintroduced, obviously that's a pretty small impact.
Right.
They said 78% or
Oh,
73%.
That's the survival.
But
That's
if a dozen little starries float off the back of the
So,
boat,
yeah.
that's a microscopic, you know, so it's just more of our own ethical thing as opposed to what that's going to make an impact.
say it's less than
Because there's a dozen little stories floating off the back of the boat, people do that off the hooks.
Right.
Or us just doing the other thing.
Depends on how many just go back in the water.
But the more fish you put back, the more chance they have to reproduce. If you put 70% back that wouldn't been put back before and 5% reproduce, that's quite a percent. That's reproducing that wouldn't have been reproduced if they were killed.
0%.
Yeah, 0% if they got killed, if you have 5%, that's,
There's something in the study on something.
Yeah, we went, Val and I had a chance to go and explore Newport last spring, and it was a ride along and go fishing, and we went out to the rigs, and I think they were fishing outside the 150 spot at about 200 feet or so. I never saw such a ridiculous slaughter of 4-inch rockfish.
And they just pile them up in the corner of the boat.
All day, and they would ask people, do you want to keep them? You know, I mean, I saw them filleting fish that were no more than 6 inches long, and the jackpot for the day was like 1.4 pounds. And there were probably 700 fish killed for that little ridiculous takeout. In my perspective, those guys are trying to make a living doing that, but they really need to step back and say, I mean, how do you control that?
Right. There's so many variables. You've got cultural, people that are maybe substance fishing, they're going out and they are going to kill even when they catch. And look at when they fish for sandbags. People go out and tell their fish counts will be thousands of sandbags. So yeah, it's a huge hurdle to overcome. How do you tell that sport fishing boat, well, okay, you can't keep any fish, so they're not going to get any tips probably. They're not going to get any fish cleaning. I mean, we've tried the last couple of years that we've talked about, how can you overcome that financial aspect of it? And these half-day trips, how much is that half-day ticket? Maybe $30, I guess? And they're going to go out and that's usually, they're fishing local, so they don't have much of an area to go out and fish from. And they do just about everything.
Jennifer, I think what Tom is saying there is really fits, and I think it's a grassroots, you use the term grassroots, things like what you were doing, getting people just thinking about it, and spreading the word, and groups of people like us spreading out among the fishermen and talking about it, and get people thinking about it. Maybe those boats will start using that equipment now. It's just something that starts slow and it will build over a period of time. It's not going to happen overnight.
Right. If you look at these guys that are running these boats and working on these boats, they've probably grown up fishing, keep everything. And that's just what
Well,
they're
they
about.
need to put size limit just like they did on gas.
Well, and the reason they've never had a size limit on rockfish is because they just assume a 6-inch or million, if it's undersized, well, it's going to die anyways. So, I don't know if that might.
They used to use it.
It would seem.
But in order to put a size, real quick, in order to put a size limit on a rockfish, then they have to legally mandate that you have a release device, because you have to build a release device.
I think a lot of us are trying to visualize what this equalizer is like. If you had one or something to demonstrate or show people, I think it would be very meaningful as to how they're used, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I know, and I had that request before, and I thought we had one in the office. I was up there a couple days ago, and we didn't.
How much would
Probably
one
was
cost
there.
that you would demonstrate?
Yeah, they're about this big, and there's just a little, approximately,
It's hard for me to visualize what that is when you're holding it up. We saw
I
it,
know.
that's all I know.
yeah, they're about $30 to $40. But you can get other release devices for as little as $5.
but what it has is a clamp, and then it's a spring-loaded thing that the water pressure opens the clamp. It's not like a bodega grip. It's that kind of clamp. So you can just clamp it, and then it's a pressurized, according to water pressure, we'll open it. That's all, magazine anyway.
How is the sports conservancy funded? How are you funded?
We are funded through grants. We're not membership driven at all, just by grants. And it's usually a lot of small grants. So every year is a struggle to, depending on there's a lot We did some stuff with the sanctuaries last year, so we had some funding from sanctuaries. Every summer, the last 2 summers, this will be the 3rd, we do a photo contest, fishing within sanctuary waters. So a lot of people assume, well, it's sanctuary, you can't fish there. But Channel Islands Marine Sanctuary, 80% of it is open fishing. So we do a photo contest, again, so we did that kind of throughout the country, all the different sanctuaries, national marine sanctuaries.
I was reading somewhere just recently that the dollar amount spent by sports fishermen a year in the U.S. is $48 billion would be. And so you've got a lot of big names out there who are not going to be in your court on this because they want to see fishermen catching larger numbers, and that sells their product in a sense. And you go to the fishing show, so you've got an uphill battle with this.
All the fishing is they're the ones that run the wet sea bass and
They can sell the release just as easy as they can sell anything else. All that is there is kind of a mandate. You gotta have one on your boat.
You know, we've seen a lot of
Then you're gonna
support.
have a business.
We've seen a lot of support from the big, Shimano, Berkeley. They've all taken a really, maybe in a little bit different focus than we are. But a lot of the large tackle and fishing, Guy Harvey, they have a huge conservation push.
I hear what you're saying,
I do,
but
yes, I
I've
do.
seen on the fishing count websites, I've never seen this in the past couple, but just like the last year or so, they're now starting to caught so many calico bass, and we released this many, so I do think there's a push.
So that's it, when they increase the size limit.
Yeah. Are they? Well, yeah. But still, just the fact that they're broadcasting that info encourages people to do it.
There are fish that are released, right?
Well, they're releasing them now,
Because
Because they have to.
but they need to release them back where they come from. And Lincoln.
Yeah, we need to get the word out there and educate people that you can't just throw them back. It's very frustrating. If you guys have any other, I know it's getting late, but I'm happy to stay and answer more questions. I did leave some business cards up here. It's got my phone number and my email. If you guys have any questions, if you guys have suggestions, we love, this is part of why I go out and talk to fishing clubs, because 1 or 2 of you might think of something that we haven't thought of. Hey, why don't you guys, ask this question? Or where do we go to all the commission meetings and the Marine Resource Committee meetings? So if you have a suggestion, something you would like to see, we love to hear those. And and that, every 3 years they do saltwater regulations, so that's coming up. Let me know, and I'll talk to Tom and April about it, and if it's something worth, pushing for that's realistic, then we're more than happy to push that. One last question.